Welcome to BL Stories, where romance, drama, and unforgettable boys' love come to life. Love knows no limits, and the best stories aren't always straight. Subscribe now and join our growing BL-loving family. Chapter 42. Eddie's POV. I set the cup on the table beside him. He glanced up from his papers long enough to look at me. You spent 2 years trying to take those guys down. I thought you'd want to be there with Nate when Kelly talked. Simon said as I eased into the chair opposite him. Around us, agents were packing up for the night while others settled in to finish work. I sighed and took a generous sip of my coffee. They'll fill me in later. I just want to go home and crawl into bed with an ice-cold beer. When he didn't answer, I studied the papers in front of him and shook my head. You're doing the paperwork now? Simon, I know you love this stuff, but it's been a long day. Go home and get some sleep. He paused, reached for the cup I'd brought, took a drink, and glanced back at his notes. I'd rather get it out of the way now. I might not come in tomorrow. Taking the day off? I asked. The corner of his mouth lifted in a half smile. Something like that. I lowered myself deeper in the chair and stretched my legs out for comfort. Have fun with it, I said, smirking. His grin widened. Don't I always? I let out a long breath. 2 years, sigh, 2 years I spent in that hellhole. For what? Simon didn't look up from his pen as it scratched over the form. I wouldn't say it was for nothing. If you two hadn't been there, none of this would have happened. We're finally making progress. Yeah, and because we were there, Kyle's fighting for his life in the hospital, and the woman I planned to marry left me. The words tasted raw. Everything happens for a reason, Ed. He said simply, filling out the last blank. Oh yeah. I pushed back. And what reason explains Kyle nearly dying and my fiancée walking out? Simon paused and met my eyes for a moment, serious. I don't know about Kyle, maybe it's just bad luck. But now that she's gone, maybe you can stop lying to yourself. Lying to myself? He didn't smile this time. About what you really want, about who you are. Now you can be yourself. His voice was soft, earnest. He looked back down at his work and I stared at my hands, not sure what to say. John's POV. I'd been an asshole to him. I'd treated him like he meant nothing, and for a while I convinced myself I meant it. It took him getting shot for me to realize how much I actually cared, and now he might die without ever knowing it. A familiar tightness seized my chest at the thought of this night getting worse. I ran a shaking hand over my face. I felt more exhausted than I should, and the tension in my shoulders pressed down on me like a weight I couldn't lift. I picked up the stale coffee I'd bought earlier and set it back down, untouched. I didn't know if I could stand it if he didn't make it. He'd grown on me over the weeks I'd known him, like he grew on everyone, and I couldn't remember life before him. I couldn't remember what it was like not to put up with his constant chatter, his nagging, the lack of privacy, his warm, ever-present smile. I didn't want to go back. I kept telling myself Kyle was a fighter, that he could pull through, but that's what you tell yourself when you're hoping for the impossible. He'd lost a lot of blood. There'd been no exit wound. Hours passed and, despite flashing my badge more times than I care to count, I still couldn't get a straight answer. He's in surgery, they said. They said words like critical condition, severe blood loss, and we're doing everything we can. The phrases were meant to comfort, but I pictured how hollow they must have sounded to Kyle's father, who sat across from me with 2 older strangers, probably Kyle's grandparents. They looked like they'd been through hell in their pressed, rumpled clothes, eyes raw with worry. I'd thought about going over to them, but what could I say? That I'd slept with their son and then told him I couldn't love him? That I'd been there when he was shot and had been useless? In the end, I stayed on my side of the room and left them on theirs. We all worried, hoped, and prayed the same quiet prayer, that we'd get our boy back and things would be okay. 3 cups of coffee and half a bag of M&Ms later, I was ready to lose my mind. Kyle's grandparents had left hours before, and his father now slept in the chair a few feet away, snoring softly. The sound echoed in the otherwise silent waiting room and nearly lulled me to sleep. I blinked rapidly and forced myself to stay awake. I'd tried everything, pacing, splashing water on my face, stretching, but it had been a brutal day, bullets in the forest, and watching someone you care about get shot. I shifted and a crinkling wrapper beside me made me wince. I pushed it away so I wouldn't ruin its packaging. An hour and a half earlier I'd run out to buy a clean shirt to change out of the bloodstained tee I'd been wearing. At the convenience store I'd grabbed a few bags of candy and one of those magazines Kyle liked. At the register I'd spotted an oversized stuffed bear, the kind people bring to sick friends, and bought that too. They wrapped the items in cellophane and stuck a bow on the bear's head. I should have stopped there and felt satisfied that he'd have something cheerful to wake to after surgery. But I wanted something more meaningful, something to show him that I was ready to give our relationship another chance. So, I called in a favor and, sitting there now, I had a certificate in my hand congratulating Kyle on becoming the proud owner of 2 baby African pygmy hedgehogs, which I was due to pick up from the pet store in a week. I'd stared at the tiny photos of the hedgehogs for a long time, wondering why he wanted the odd little animals with their pointy snouts and soft undersides. In the end it didn't matter. They would help me say what I couldn't say in words, and I was sure he'd understand the gesture. I placed the certificate beside the gift basket and started pacing again. The wait had given me time to think. I'd made some decisions. After we finished this case, I was leaving the FBI for good. It was time to find something less dangerous, something that wouldn't have me looking over my shoulder all the time, worrying that a case might put someone I cared about in danger. Nathan's plan seemed possible, and if he needed a partner I'd be there. In the chaos I'd even sketched out a plan to get Kyle off the hook, an idea that would be foolproof if the chief agreed. I had high hopes Kyle would be a free man as soon as I put things in motion. Here's your rewritten story, polished with correct grammar, smoother phrasing, and a PG-rated tone that fits YouTube's community guidelines while keeping the emotional depth and tension intact. I'd also thought about traveling for a while, visiting my family's graves, something I hadn't done in years. Then, maybe even moving somewhere new. A true fresh start. This whole ordeal had opened my eyes. It was time to stop making excuses and start living in a way that could actually bring me peace. As I bent down to tie a loose shoelace, the door opened. A new visitor stepped inside. I looked up and saw Eddie, carrying a 6-pack of beer in one hand and 2 steaming cups of coffee in the other. Straightening, I frowned at him as he walked closer. "What's with the beer?" I asked. "It's for Kyle. A get-well present," he explained, setting it on the chair beside the gifts I had brought earlier. "I doubt he'll be able to drink alcohol with all the medication he'll be on," I said. Eddie shrugged. "It was Simon's idea." That made sense. Of course it was Simon. "Here," Eddie said, handing me one of the cups of coffee. I accepted it gratefully. "Any news?" he asked. I shook my head and sat down. "Nothing yet." We both took small sips of the coffee, the warmth settling in as silence stretched between us. "I feel like it's my kid brother in there," Eddie said softly after a moment. "Never thought I'd come to care so much about 2 men I first met in prison, but Kyle and Riley, it's hard to imagine life without them now, after everything we've been through." I nodded slowly. "How's Riley holding up?" "He's worried about Kyle, but he's managing. I stayed with him for a while. Jerry came by after I left, so Riley's not alone." Eddie gestured toward the man asleep a few feet away. "That his dad?" "Yeah," I said quietly. "He's been here for hours." We fell into another silence. Every time a door opened or footsteps echoed down the hallway, I looked up expecting a doctor, but each time it wasn't. I felt both relief and disappointment. "The chief wants you to come in for your debriefing," Eddie said after a while. "I'm not leaving until Kyle comes out of surgery," I told him firmly. He nodded in understanding. "He's going to be fine," he said, though it sounded like he was trying to convince both of us. "This is Kyle we're talking about, the guy who stood up to Beans and walked out alive, who ran after Riley when he escaped just to make sure he was okay, and who braved bullets in the woods to find us. He's a fighter. No bullet is going to stop him. We just have to believe that." I looked down, my voice quieter. "The thing is, I don't want to spend my life remembering Kyle. I'd rather have him right here in front of me." Nate's POV. "My dad said they killed him because of what he knew. It won't take them long to realize how he found out." The recording played. I watched Kelly's expression as he listened to his son's voice. He looked pale, thinner than the last time I'd seen him in prison. Until now, he'd refused to talk, showing no emotion no matter how we questioned him. This was the first time he looked shaken. His son was his weakness. I should have led with this from the start. "I want to see him," Kelly said at last. I glanced at the chief standing behind him. He shook his head, so I passed the message along. "Your son is facing charges. Obstruction of justice, accessory after the fact, and more. And all because of you." "Please," Kelly pleaded. "He has nothing to do with this. He's just a kid. He has his whole life ahead of him. He shouldn't be punished for my mistakes." His voice cracked as tears escaped. In that moment, he just looked like a broken old man who had made terrible choices and left devastation behind. "Riley had his whole life ahead of him too," I reminded him. "He's the same age as your son. And you let him take the fall for your actions. Why should James, who's actually guilty, be spared?" Kelly's lip trembled. "I would have looked after him," he whispered. "I would have protected Riley in there." I clenched my jaw. He was about to start college. Then you had his father killed, tore him from his home, and left him to survive in prison. And now you tell me you would have taken care of him? Kelly dropped his head, unable to answer. I shoved my hands into my pockets. "You know what makes us different, Mr. Kelly? I'm not heartless. I'll give your son a deal, but only if you give me what I need." Hope flickered in his eyes. "You'll let him go free?" I shook my head. "No. The charges against him are serious. He lied to federal agents more than once. He warned you we were coming, and he knew what you'd done but didn't report it. He even benefited from the money you made off your crimes. He doesn't get to walk away completely. He's an adult. He has to face some consequences." Kelly slumped. "Then what kind of deal?" "He pleads guilty. In court. We'll push for probation and community service. That's the best I can offer." With that, Kelly finally talked. He told us everything, start to finish. The camera on the table recorded every detail, every expression. But why would the warden risk an escape from his own prison? I asked when he finished. "We all had our parts to play." "That was his," Kelly said with a shrug. "Is there something you're not telling me?" I pressed. Kelly's voice grew urgent. "You have to protect my son. They'll go after him. They'll kill him for what I'm about to tell you." I took a deep breath and nodded. "We'll keep him safe. You have my word." Kelly searched my eyes, then blinked away his tears and continued. "The warden was only a conduit," he said. My brow furrowed. "You're telling me someone else was in charge?" He nodded. "I never met him, but I heard whispers. They call him Emmanuel. That's all I know. But you'll never find him. Even if you do, there are others waiting to take his place." "Anything else?" I asked firmly. "And think carefully, because if I find out you're hiding something, your son will end up in a cell right beside you." "That's it. I swear," Kelly said. Just then, a knock sounded at the door. An agent stepped inside. "Chief, Nathan, a word please?" I followed them into the hallway. Carlton Bates and his wife were just found dead in their apartment 10 minutes ago, the agent reported. I raked a hand through my hair, frustration boiling inside me. When does this nightmare end? The warden was dead. Now this. What next? I walked down the well-lit hallway of the lockup, carrying a cup of orange juice and a chicken sandwich. The guard's keys jingled with every step, his boots echoing on the floor as we went. When we reached the holding cell, I waited somewhat impatiently as the guard fumbled through the large ring of keys. He seemed to take forever, and I couldn't help feeling restless. At last, with a grin and a nod, he unlocked the heavy door. I stepped inside the dimly lit room, and the lock clicked shut behind me. Riley stood by the small bed, his wide eyes lifting to mine in relief. Setting the food tray on the table, I barely had a chance to straighten before he rushed into my arms. Hours had passed since he was brought in, and seeing him safe again made my chest loosen with relief. I held him tightly, savoring the warmth of his presence and the steady sound of his breathing. "I was wondering when you'd come," he said softly once we pulled apart. I handed him the food and drink. Sitting beside him on the bed, I reached up to smooth a hand through his short hair. "I've been interrogating Edward Kelly," I told him. Riley paused mid-bite to glance at me. And? What did he say? I leaned over and brushed away the bit of mayo stuck at the corner of his mouth with my thumb. James was telling the truth. Kelly confessed. That's good news, right? That means I'll be out soon. I nodded. Yes, but there's more. The warden and his wife, they were found dead in their apartment 2 hours ago. He sighed heavily. There's always something. I agreed. This case had been nothing but twists and obstacles since the very beginning. After a thoughtful bite, Riley spoke again, his tone more somber. Eddie told me Kyle's still in surgery. I gave a small nod. But he'll pull through. We have to stay positive. He looked down at his half-eaten food, worry flickering across his expression. Do you think I can see him once he's recovering? Of course. I'll arrange it as soon as I hear from John. Riley's gaze softened. And what about you? Are you feeling any better from the flu? My throat's still sore and my nose won't stop running, but it's nothing compared to earlier at the motel, I admitted, then gestured to his orange juice. Drink it all, you'll need your strength when we go see Kyle. That earned me a small smile. I miss him already, Riley murmured. I felt the same. Kyle had always been a handful, but the thought of losing him was unthinkable. When do you have to leave? Riley asked quietly. I'll stay as long as I can. At that, he carefully set his food aside, slid closer, and wrapped an arm around me. I pulled him close in return, holding him tightly, grateful for the moment of calm we shared. Later that night, I bounded up the hospital stairs 2 at a time, too restless to wait for the elevator. By the time I reached the waiting room, I was breathless. I spotted John and Eddie immediately. Eddie nudged John, who looked up, acknowledging me with only a tired nod. He slumped in his chair, exhaustion written all over his face, and my heart ached for him. We all cared for Kyle, but for John the weight was heavier. It was clear he was barely holding himself together. I couldn't imagine how I would cope if it were Riley behind those doors instead of Kyle. Just the thought made me. John sat silently, running his thumb over a small piece of wood in his hand. I gestured toward it. What's that? He opened his palm to show me. They found it in Kyle's pocket. I carved it for him back at the cabin. He kept it all this time. His voice shook. Closing his fist over it, he looked away. I placed a steady hand on his shoulder. I didn't realize how much I cared about him until all this, John admitted. He knows, I reassured him gently. Kyle's always known, even before you did. That's why he's not going to give up. He'll fight his way back, and then you can tell him yourself. I urged him to get some rest, but John shook his head. I'm fine. I offered again. You can come to my place for a few hours, get some food, shower, then I'll bring you straight back. But I knew he wouldn't leave. If it had been Riley, nothing in the world would have dragged me from that hospital until I knew he was safe. Before he could reply, Eddie nudged him, drawing our attention toward the doorway. A doctor had entered, scanning the room before approaching a man seated a few chairs away. The man stood quickly, hands clasped tightly together. John and Eddie rose too. I realized for the first time that the man must be Kyle's father. Mr. McMillan? The doctor asked. Kyle's father nodded, bracing himself for the news. Beside me, John drew in a sharp, unsteady breath. Chapter 43. Riley's POV. I paced the small room, moving from the tiny window to the opposite wall until my feet ached. Finally, I sank onto the bed, too restless to even touch the books Nate had brought earlier. Nothing could distract me, not when my best friend was lying in the hospital, 2 days after surgery, still unconscious. I wanted to be there with him. I wanted him to know he wasn't alone, that I was waiting for him to wake up. With a sigh, I glanced around the room, already sick of it after 2.5 days. I was counting the moments until Nate returned with the news that this was over, that I could finally leave. I was especially grateful when he told me John had found a way to help Kyle, too. I had lost count of the number of times I had imagined what life would be like outside, free, walking in public with Kyle, John, and Nate. Living a normal life with the people who mattered most. Lying back on the pillow, I hummed a broken tune to keep my thoughts steady. My mind wandered, imagining the feel of fresh air, The kind that wasn't confined by walls and locked doors. I wanted it so badly it almost made my mouth water. Am I interrupting something? The voice startled me. My head shot up to see Simon standing in the doorway. I hadn't even heard the lock turn. Simon? What are you doing here? Best, surprised. Of all the people, he was the last I expected to see. I'm taking you to lunch. Come on, he said simply, already turning to leave. I blinked, then hurried after him before the guards at the door changed their minds. Stepping outside, the fresh air hit me like a gift. Simon led me to a bright red car that looked like it belonged on the cover of a magazine. Shiny, sleek, expensive, and I had no doubt it was fast. Sliding into the passenger seat, I soon learned exactly how fast. The drive was quiet. Simon wasn't one for small talk, and I didn't expect him to be. From the moment I met him, I knew he was the strong, silent type, intelligent, confident, and focused. Sitting beside him sometimes made me feel self-conscious, but there was a calmness in the silence we shared. He didn't play music, didn't hum, didn't speak. Just the sound of the wind rushing past as we drove. Strangely, it was comforting. He finally pulled into a diner in a part of town I'd never visited. Inside, I was surprised when he ordered something simple, just burgers and fries with extra ketchup. I ordered the same. As we ate, he studied me with quiet curiosity. Why'd you do this? I asked, popping a fry into my mouth. He sipped his lemonade before replying. I felt sorry for you. That was it. Straightforward. Honest. Pure Simon. Well, thanks, I guess, I said, unsure. He only gave a small nod. While I finished my milkshake, Simon's phone rang. He answered between bites of fries. Yeah. His eyes flicked to mine as he listened. Whatever the caller said, his expression shifted. I'm on my way, he replied, standing up. So much for lunch, I muttered, following his lead. Kyle's awake, he said, dropping bills on the table. For a moment my heart stopped. Then it soared. I could barely breathe as we rushed back to the car. Simon drove fast, but to me every mile felt like an eternity. The waiting room was alive with energy when we arrived. Members of the crew filled the space, voices overlapping in laughter, chatter, and relief. As soon as I stepped in, people greeted me warmly. The mood was lighter than it had been in days. Someone told me Kyle had asked for me first when he woke, and my chest swelled with emotion. Though he had only stayed awake for a couple of minutes before drifting off again, his father had remained at his side, waiting for him to stir. I found a seat beside Michael, who smiled at me. Good to see you smiling again, he said. Michael had been one of Nate's crew back at the prison, and one of the first to accept me as part of the team. He had been injured on duty weeks ago and was still on leave. Yeah, I admitted with a grin. I'm just glad Kyle's finally awake. How's your shoulder? It's healing. I'll be back soon, he said with determination. I smiled, reassured by his positivity. Before I could reply, Nate entered the room carrying a large gift bag. The others greeted him warmly, and my heart lifted when his eyes found mine. He walked over, draping an arm over my shoulder. I was about to pick you up. What are you doing here? Simon brought me, I replied with a smile. My gaze dropped to the gift bag. What did you get, Kyle? He let me peek inside, where I found a card tucked among the gifts. When I opened it, I was stunned. My name was scrawled beside his in the message. You put my name on it? I asked quietly. Of course, he said, taking it back. Then, with a knowing look, he asked, Have you seen him yet? Not yet. His father's still in there. I hear Kyle gets tired quickly. Nate nodded and sat down, tugging me onto his lap before I could find a chair of my own. My cheeks burned, but no one seemed to notice, or maybe they just didn't care. With a sigh, I leaned against his chest, feeling the steady rhythm of his heartbeat calm me. 2 hours later, we were finally allowed to see Kyle. One by one, the others went in to speak with him briefly before leaving. When John's turn came, I quietly stood at the doorway watching. Kyle looked pale and fragile, thinner than before, with tubes running from his wrists. The sight made my lips tremble, but the light in his eyes was unmistakable. He was still Kyle, still himself. You know, when I was younger, I was terrified of stuffed bears, Kyle rasped, his weak voice carrying to John, who held up a bear for him to see. John chuckled softly and handed him a folded piece of paper. Kyle's hands shook as he lifted it. His eyes scanned the words, then filled with tears. His face crumpled, and soon he was sobbing openly. "I knew it," he whispered through tears. "I knew you loved me, Johnny." John leaned forward, pressing a gentle kiss to his forehead. My own eyes blurred at the sight. Turning, I caught Nate's gaze from across the hall. He smiled, and I gave him a thumbs up, my heart lighter than it had been in days. Riley's POV. I stepped back when they began speaking quietly, deciding to give them a moment of privacy. It was nearly half an hour before Nate and I finally had our turn with Kyle, and when Nate brought me back to my cell afterward, I was still smiling. 3 weeks later. 3 weeks. That was how long I remained locked in the small cell before I saw any real progress in my case. During that time, I nearly made myself sick with worry, afraid I wouldn't be allowed to go free after all. Nate came by every day around noon, staying as long as he could. He always assured me that I'd be released soon, but the longer I waited, the more I doubted it. By law, I was allowed 1 hour of sunlight and fresh air each day, but the rest of my time was spent pacing the 4 corners of my cell, restless and frustrated. The only real relief came when someone visited. Jerry came as often as possible. Once, he even brought my baby brother after convincing my mother to let him. I played with him until they left, then cried afterward because it had been months since I'd last seen him. Eddie visited almost as much as Nate, but I never saw Kyle. I'd been told he was released from the hospital just a few days earlier and placed in his own holding cell. We could only exchange messages through John, Eddie, or Nate. I missed him terribly, and every night I prayed for the day we'd see each other again. Meanwhile, I heard James had already been released on probation. The news left me bitter, angry that Kyle and I were still stuck while he was free to walk around. The frustration drained my motivation. I even stopped reading, and eventually Nate stopped bringing me books altogether. On another dull day, when I was pacing my cell, a weary-looking guard appeared and led me out. We walked through wide double doors, down a narrow hallway, and into a large office. To my shock, Kyle, John, and Nate were already seated inside. At the head of the room sat the chief, the man I'd only met once before. He looked stern, his sharp gaze fixed on me as I was guided to a chair beside Kyle. I tried not to flinch under his intimidating stare, forcing myself to stay steady. At last, he shifted his attention to the others. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding and glanced at Kyle, who gave me a small, reassuring smile. "All right, now that we're all here," the chief said, "let's get down to business." He cleared his throat before speaking again. In light of the circumstances, Edward Kelly's confession, the confessions of his accomplices, and the overwhelming evidence against him, I owe you an apology on behalf of the state. My heart pounded as he looked directly at me. You've been exonerated of all charges relating to your murder conviction, effective immediately. The words barely sank in. My eyes darted to Nate, who gave me a small, proud smile. The chief's voice, however, soon brought me back. As for the other charges against you, that's another matter. My stomach sank. You escaped from a maximum security prison. You and Kyle are also suspected of being connected to the destruction of state property. I opened my mouth to protest, but the chief raised a hand, silencing me. I've spoken with my agents, and they all assured me you weren't involved in that destruction. I've handled that part already. But the escape itself, that can't be ignored. Leaning forward, he clasped his hands together. Let's be frank. I know my agents helped you escape. They told me there was no other way, and I trust them completely. I've called in some favors, and I've already submitted a report stating you both agreed to a deal, assisting in the investigation against Kelly in exchange for reduced sentences. In other words, your escape was officially under my authorization. I nodded slowly, realizing exactly what he wanted us to do. Keep quiet and uphold the story. If not for your help, we wouldn't have gotten this far. So, you're free to go. Relief hit me like a wave, but it was followed by confusion. So, if anyone asks, That's what I'm supposed to say happened? The chief nodded. But why would you do this for us? You don't even really know who we are. For the first time since I walked in, he smiled. I know enough. Kyle's voice broke through the moment, filled with hope. So, that's it? We can leave. But the chief shook his head. Your case is different, Mr. McMillan. Riley was never guilty, aside from the escape. But you still have a hit-and-run sentence to complete. I've already gotten you out of one charge, but this one stands. John began to speak, but the chief silenced him with a raised hand. You'll be placed on probation. You'll have a curfew, and you'll need to meet with a probation officer once a week. Kyle sighed but nodded. So, one of those ankle monitors? The chief confirmed with a nod. You'll meet with your probation officer after this meeting. She'll explain everything. Papers were pushed across the desk. Kyle and I signed quickly, desperate for this nightmare to end. As we stood to leave, the chief lifted one of the papers. I don't need to remind you, what was said here today stays here. If word gets out, it won't end well for any of us. We both nodded in agreement. John took Kyle to meet his probation officer while Nate walked beside me. It felt unreal. After everything, I was free. Truly free. I thought back to the people I'd met in prison, men who had protected me, guided me, and stood by me when I felt like I had no one. I went in expecting nothing but hardship and loneliness, but instead I had found friendship, loyalty, and even love. I had gained a best friend. I had found a family. And most of all, I had found Nate. When we stepped through the front doors and into the cool air, I stopped suddenly, grabbing Nate's wrist. He turned to me, his smile soft and patient. What is it? My throat tightened, eyes stinging with tears. I love you, I whispered, every word heavy with the truth of everything we had been through. Nate's smile grew as his eyes warmed with quiet amusement and certainty. I know, he replied gently. And in that moment, the weight of everything we had endured finally lifted. Bonus chapter. 1 year later. Kyle's POV. The poor, sad soul. I shook my head as I watched Riley shove yet another pair of jeans into his suitcase. Who even needs 13 pairs of jeans? I asked. Riley gave me a look, his big round eyes narrowed. I thought you came over to help me pack. I curled my legs underneath me on the couch, hugging a cushion. I did. But watching you is making me lose all the excitement. I mean, aren't you supposed to be thrilled right now? He let out a dramatic sigh. I want to go, but I don't want to go. You know what I mean. You're heading to university to do all the things you've always dreamed of. You should be excited, like you were the day you found out you got in. I know, Riley admitted softly, but I don't want to leave Nate. I rolled my eyes. Nate will survive. He's got me, Johnny, Eddie, and the rest of the guys to keep him busy. When Riley frowned, I smirked. Oh, I see. You don't actually want him to be fine without you. You want him to be miserable while you're gone, huh? His cheeks turned pink, and he covered his face with his hand. Is that such a bad thing? I shrugged. If I were leaving, I'd want Johnny to miss me like crazy too. So yeah, it's normal. Riley flopped onto the couch, pouting. Nate says he doesn't want me living on campus. He wants me to rent an apartment nearby instead. That counts as something, right? First years are required to live on campus. You don't have a choice. Well, maybe they'll make an exception. I burst out laughing. Oh sure, just tell the dean. Sorry sir, but my boyfriend is too worried I'll get swept off my feet by college guys, so can you make an exception? Riley bit his lip, pretending to consider it, until I nudged him with my foot. He laughed. Oh, I know it wouldn't work. Honestly, Nate doesn't have anything to worry about. Everyone knows you'd never look at anyone else. Yeah, well, John gets jealous of you all the time, Riley pointed out. I grinned instantly. That's because Johnny's hopelessly in love with me. I forgive him for being jealous. Riley sighed again. Sometimes I wonder if it's not just jealousy. Sometimes I think maybe he doesn't trust me. Or maybe, I teased, you're just overthinking. Which, by the way, could be a sign of a hidden condition. He rolled his eyes while I tried to kick him again, but he dodged this time. Look, Riley, even if you could live off campus, I'd still tell you not to. College is about fun and new experiences. Living on campus is part of it. Nate's just going to have to accept that. Riley pouted again. I guess. And besides, I added, if you don't live on campus, I'll miss out on the fun too. He glanced at me. Are you really going to visit me every week like you promised? Would I lie? I asked seriously. When he shook his head, I grinned. I'll come during the week since I know Nate will want the weekends. Riley made a face. He hasn't even said he'll visit. Lucky for you, I've got inside info. He told Johnny he's rearranging his schedule so he can visit you every weekend. That made Riley blush again. He still got shy whenever Nate came up, even after all this time. I wish you were coming with me, Riley mumbled. Can't you enroll too? Take a couple classes or something? I can't. I've got Johnny to look after. Besides, this is your chance to grow, meet new people, and finally come out of that shy shell of yours. I pointed at him. But don't you dare forget, you'll never find another Kyle. Don't even try replacing me. He waved me off, so I reached for the small bag I'd brought. Tossing it at him, I waited as he caught it midair. What's this? He asked. Your congrats on college gift, I said. He peeked inside, then frowned at me in disbelief. Really, Kyle? What? It's practical. I grinned. Riley shook his head and tossed it back at me. No way. Nate would never let me hear the end of it if he saw that in my suitcase. I just laughed and the two of us went back to packing. We were still at it when Nate finally walked in after being buried in his study all day. He dropped a small box of Band-Aids onto Riley's pile of clothes and looked around at the chaos in his living room. What if my roommate doesn't like me? Riley worried out loud. What if he's, the difficult type? Then request a room change, I said with a shrug. Or better yet, call your big bad boyfriend and let him handle it. I glanced at Nate, who was watching Riley with that unreadable expression of his. Riley, however, kept spiraling. I just hope everything goes smoothly. I want a good roommate, good professors, a good experience, and good people. Unfortunately, we don't live in a perfect world, Nate muttered before disappearing into the kitchen. Riley groaned into his hands while I whistled low. Is it just me, or is he moodier than usual? He's working on a tough case, Riley explained. Johnny's on that same case, and he's not half as grouchy, I pointed out. Riley only shrugged again, avoiding my eyes. I glanced around the room, taking in all the framed photos of Riley and Nate decorating every wall and surface. Their memories filled the place, proof of everything they'd shared over the past year. But Riley, being Riley, hadn't noticed what was obvious to everyone else. Nate's irritability had nothing to do with his case. It had everything to do with Riley leaving. For the first time since they met, they were about to be apart for longer than a few days. And if I were in Nate's shoes? Honestly, I'd probably be just as anxious. Kyle's POV. I would worry about how Riley would manage so far away without me. I'd worry about all the new people he'd meet and whether his experiences might change him. I'd even worry about all the attention he might get from others who couldn't see that his heart already belonged to someone. Just the thought made me shake my head. Now Riley was removing the jeans he'd previously stuffed into his suitcase. Honestly, I didn't think he would change too much. He'd probably gain some confidence and come out of his shell a little. He'd also learn to be more independent, but knowing Riley, there was no way he'd be swayed by anyone else when he was so devoted to Nate. The only real concern, in my opinion, was him choosing the wrong friends. Riley didn't always have the best instincts when it came to trusting people. But that's where I came in. I'd be around as often as possible to make sure he stayed on the right path. Johnny thought I was being overprotective and nosy, but hey, I knew best. Did you get everything on your list? I asked. He nodded. Everything except bed sheets. I'll get that tomorrow morning. Oh, and Simon's helping me pick out a laptop. Bad idea. Riley frowned. Why? Because Simon will pick out the most complicated, high-tech, and most expensive laptop he can find. He's a total tech enthusiast, he won't be able to help himself. Riley chuckled. That's why I asked Eddie to come too. He can balance Simon out if things get too crazy. Oh, Simon and Eddie in the same room? Count me in. I could use some second-hand romantic tension. It's like reading a love story, except the characters are 10 times more interesting and I can take mental pictures. Riley laughed. I feel like they'd already be together if they really liked each other. I patted his head. My sweet Riley, life's not that simple. They need to work through their issues first. You make it sound like you know something I don't. I just have good instincts. That's all I need. Yeah, whatever. Come help me with this one, he said, pointing to a small suitcase in the corner. What are you putting in there? More clothes? You're packing like you're moving to another planet. Better to have more than less, he replied confidently. Just pack all my skincare stuff in there. I sighed, abandoning the couch cushion and joining him on the floor. There were bottles and jars everywhere. When you and Nate buy a house someday, make sure you get your own bathroom. It's not fair that Nate loses all his counter space just because you're a skincare collector. Nate's fine with it, he said, and I began helping, reading labels I didn't understand. Wait, did you make this? I asked, holding up a small jar. He nodded. I opened it and took a deep breath. It smelled like honey and citrus, sweet and fresh. Without hesitation, I spread a little on my face. Ever think about opening a shop? You're always making these amazing things. I'd invest. He shook his head. I just do it for fun. If I turned it into a business, it wouldn't feel the same. Fair point, I said, wiping my fingers before sealing the jar and packing it away. When we finished, I stretched. So, what time are you getting the laptop tomorrow? Simon's picking me up at 10. Where are you staying tonight? Your place or John's? If it's John's, Simon can pick you up since it's on the way. Probably John's, but I'll let you know later. We packed in silence for a bit before Riley caught me staring. Why are you looking at me like that? I sighed. I can't believe you're leaving me. Who am I supposed to annoy now? Who will I gossip with? You and Johnny are the only ones who put up with me, and now you're abandoning me with boring people. He laughed. Then enroll in a couple of courses and come with me. You don't believe me when I say Johnny needs me, but it's true. What does he need you for? Riley asked with a puzzled look. I'm his entertainment, his stress relief, his grocery shopping buddy, his midnight comforter when he has bad dreams, and most importantly, I'm the one he loves, I said dramatically. Riley shook his head, amused. What do you think he'd say if you told him you were leaving too? Maybe he wouldn't believe me. Or maybe he'd be upset. Should I test it out tonight? If he'll be upset, why bother? Because I'm curious, I said with a grin. Your choice, Riley muttered. I touched the mask on my face. By the way, how long am I supposed to keep this on? Take it off whenever. You're a terrible businessman, I teased. That's because I'm not a businessman, he said with a small smile, turning back to his packing. I watched him for a while, feeling a genuine heaviness in my chest. In 3 days he'd be gone. Life would be a little less lively without him around. Can't you just do online courses? I asked suddenly. You're the one who told me to enjoy the full college experience, he reminded me. I'm allowed at least one selfish moment per hour, I sighed, getting to my feet. I'll leave you to it. I followed the smell of food into the kitchen, where Nate was making dinner. He glanced up when I entered but said nothing, focusing on the pot in front of him. Before I could speak, he beat me to it. Go home. I can't. Why not? He asked, giving me his signature glare. Because Riley says you're making spaghetti. And? I want some. No. I pouted. Are you seriously still mad about that night at the club? I told you it wasn't my fault. Riley just attracts attention without even trying. You can't blame me for that. You're a bad influence, he muttered. That was weeks ago. I promise not to take him anywhere like that again. Nate stayed quiet, the look in his eyes sharp enough to make me drop my head onto my folded arms. For 10 minutes, I watched him work before speaking again. So, I heard you guys still haven't hired a secretary. This time he looked up, though briefly. I want you to hire me, I blurted. Nate chuckled, shaking his head as he stirred the pot. Come on, Nate. Why not give me a chance? I'm sure John already told you no. Why would my answer be any different? Because you're business partners, you're supposed to decide together. Johnny decided on his own. That's not fair. Even if we discussed it, the answer would still be the same, no. But since when am I not allowed to be interested in working? I folded my arms, frustrated that neither of them seemed to take me seriously. Nate's piercing green eyes met mine, unreadable as ever. Since when have you ever been interested in work? And just like that, I knew the argument wasn't over, but it also wasn't one I could win tonight. What's so wrong with me wanting to work? Is that a crime? You're too impulsive, Kyle. If we give you a job today, you'll quit tomorrow. We're looking for someone reliable, someone who'll get the job done right. I'm not impulsive anymore. I've changed, I argued, trying to reason with the expressionless wall standing in front of me. You quit your volunteer work at your father's firm after only 3 days. That was last week. People can change in the span of a few minutes. I insisted. We locked eyes for 2 whole minutes before he finally turned away to drain the water from the spaghetti he was cooking. Why do you even want to work as our secretary? So I can be near Johnny, I said honestly. I'd always heard honesty was the best policy in interviews. I'm completely committed to him, so since he's my motivation, I'll work harder than ever. I don't need someone committed to John. I need someone committed to the actual work. If you can't even convince your boyfriend, I don't know why you thought you could convince me. I bet if Riley asked, you'd give him the job in a heartbeat. Yes, Nate admitted without hesitation. Because Riley works hard, never quits when it gets tough, and understands the importance of what we do. Then why don't you just hire him? He's the model employee. Nate smirked, clearly amused. He never applied for the job. Besides, he's heading off to college soon, so it would be pointless. I was on the verge of dropping to my knees and begging when my phone rang, interrupting the moment. Hey, Johnny, I answered with a sigh. There was a pause before he replied. Why do you sound like that? What's wrong? Would you give Riley the secretary job over me? Yes, he answered instantly. You and Nate are the worst. You're supposed to be on my side, I complained. Don't bother coming for me. I'll take a cab home. I'm already on my way. Pack up your things, he said, as if my words hadn't fazed him at all. Then he hung up. Groaning, I dropped my cheek against the counter dramatically. Nate set a steaming plate of spaghetti and meatballs right in front of me, and my sour mood instantly lifted. Nate's spaghetti was legendary. Heaven on a plate. Fireworks in your mouth. I accepted the fork he held out and started eating without hesitation. When Riley left for college, I knew these meals would be rare treasures, and the thought already felt like a loss. Can I maybe take some home too? Since it's probably the last time you'll make it? I asked sweetly, glancing up at him through my lashes. Everyone knew he only cooked it because it was Riley's favorite. The storage containers are in the cupboard. Don't make a mess, Nate replied. I stared at him, shocked. Does this mean you forgive me? But he was already walking away with 2 plates in hand. Sometimes I really wonder what Riley sees in him, I muttered to my plate. He's like a rock, cold, serious, and impossible to read. I twirled one of Riley's handmade lollipops in my fingers. I'd never understood how he found the energy to make candy, scrubs, music boxes, popsicles, something new every day. I just didn't have that kind of patience. I preferred gathering important information, like who was dating whom, or what big changes were happening around me. My phone rang again. I'm outside, Johnny said as soon as I picked up. Aren't you coming in? I'm eating. No, I'm exhausted. Just pack it up and let's go. Did you eat already? No, I'm not hungry. Nate made spaghetti, though. I teased, and after a long pause, he gave in. I could spare a few minutes, he murmured more to himself than to me. Seconds later, I heard his spare key turning in the lock. He came in looking tired but still effortlessly handsome, his hair sticking up from running his hands through it 1,000 times. Sit down, I'll serve you, I said, moving to fix him a plate. You look tired, I added as I handed it over. Understatement, he muttered, digging in. What's that on your face? He asked between bites. Riley's honey and lemon scrub. I'm testing it as a face mask. I sat beside him, stealing bites from his plate. I missed you today. You know, if I'm your secretary, we can spend every day together. You don't need to be a secretary to come by the office. No one's stopping you. My dad says I'm too clingy. That one day, you'll run away because of it. Since when do you listen to your dad? Johnny asked with a tired but gentle look. He's not the only one who said it. Mario and Mackenzie too. I frowned. Stop listening to other people. Do what makes you happy, Johnny said firmly before turning back to his food. I reached out to smooth his messy hair. Riley's leaving. It feels like I'm losing a piece of myself. Didn't you say you'd visit him once a week? Yeah, but it's not the same. I want him to enjoy college, make friends, be independent, but I want to be there for all of it too. Selfish, right? Johnny paused, set his fork down, and turned to me with suddenly clear, alert eyes. Are you saying you want to go to college with him? I would if you were coming too. But since you're not, I'd just be miserable, I admitted. I just wish things could stay the same. Everything's about to change and I don't like it. That's life. Change is inevitable. We just have to face it. I was hoping for something more profound, I teased. Instead of answering, he leaned in, kissed me softly, then returned to his plate as if nothing had happened. I smiled, resting my chin in my hands as I watched him. That was Johnny, rough around the edges, but mine. Johnny, I whispered once he finished eating. I have good news and bad news. Which one do you want first? Whichever. Okay, the bad news is I'm going out of town for 1 week starting Monday. His fork stilled. He turned to me, his eyes focused now. Out of town? Where? I'm going to keep Riley company during his first week of school. I want to help him unpack, get settled, and adjust to everything, I said. Johnny was already shaking his head before I even finished. When are you and Nate going to stop babying him? He's not the first person to go off to college. He can manage on his own. I frowned. So, are you saying that if I were leaving for college, you wouldn't stay with me for the first week and visit me every weekend? That's different. I rolled my eyes. How exactly is that different? You're independent. I know you can take care of yourself. You two don't really give Riley the chance to stand on his own. Yes, we do. What's so wrong with wanting to support him? He's my best friend. It's only 1 week. After that, he'll be on his own, and he'll have plenty of time to become independent. Johnny stayed quiet for a while before asking, where are you planning to stay when you get there? I booked a hotel near campus. You can come too if you want. I can't take a week off work, he said gruffly. So, what's the good news? I grinned. I bought you a non-refundable plane ticket, which means you have to come with me. It'll be fun, Johnny. Plus, you haven't taken time off in ages. You deserve a vacation, and we're long overdue for one. The look in his eyes told me he was imagining all the ways he could strangle me. Smiling innocently, I put on my best, cute Kyle face to convince him. Kyle, it's just 1 week out of a whole year. All you ever do is work. Some of us have to make a living. You don't have to. Your family left you more than enough to live comfortably. You just choose not to, because... I trailed off, suddenly regretting my words. His family was a sensitive subject, and I'd just thrown it in his face. I braced myself for him to snap, but instead, he simply shook his head. Well, unlike you, I like working. It makes me feel useful. I pouted. So, you're saying I'm not useful to society? He smiled, and because his smiles were rare, and they made my heart skip, I leaned in and kissed him twice before pulling back, grinning. What's the point of having a trust fund if I can't enjoy it? I teased. He rested his cheek in his hand and watched me. No one's stopping you from enjoying it. But we never do anything fun together. You drag me out every weekend, he reminded me. If you don't come, I'll just hang out with Riley for 2 weeks, maybe more, I threatened lightly. He gave me another rare smile. Are you blackmailing me? I shrugged. If that's what it takes. Then I stole another quick kiss, because Johnny's smiling was priceless. All right, I'll take 3 days off. 6 days. That's the best I can do. Deal. I grinned and held out my hand. He shook it firmly, just the way I liked. He leaned close to my ear and I expected something sweet, but instead he whispered, "Get to the car. I'm tired." "You were supposed to say something nice," I frowned. "Like what?" he asked, gathering the dishes. "I don't know, something like, 'You're beautiful.'" "Have you seen your face lately?" he asked, eyeing the sink. I groaned. I'd forgotten all about the face mask. "I'm going to wash this off, and when I get back, you'd better say something nice," I warned playfully as I walked away. In the living room, Nate and Riley were curled up on the couch. Nate fiddled with some gadget while Riley ate his dinner, cross-legged like one of those Buddha figurines he once gifted me. I ducked into the bathroom and washed off the mask. To my surprise, Riley's honey and lemon scrub actually left my skin glowing. Picking up a bar of his homemade soap, I sniffed. "Minty," I whispered with a smile. Riley had talent, layers I never knew about back in the old days. Unlike Nate, who only had one layer, the essence of grumpiness with maybe a dash of good looks. I sighed. I was really going to miss Riley when he left. Universities, tearing families apart since the beginning of time. Pulling out my phone, I shot my dad a quick text. "Me, I'm dropping by the office in the morning." "Dad, any reason in particular?" "Me, I need to talk about my feelings." "Dad, I'm a lawyer, not a therapist." "Me, then why do you have a therapist chair in your office?" "Besides, I don't trust therapists. My brain's too precious to share with just anyone." "Dad, busy day tomorrow." "Another time." "Me, I'll be there at 8 a.m. "Dad, fine. But 1 hour only." "Me, 2 at the most." "Dad, alright. Don't be late." "Me, I'm never late." When I came out, Riley was quietly laughing at something Nate whispered, while Johnny had dozed off in the chair across from them. I flicked his ear gently, and his tired eyes opened. "Time to go, sleepyhead." "Ready?" he asked, his voice groggy but warm. Later, as Johnny pulled the car out of Nate's driveway, he asked, "What's going on with Riley? You noticed it too?" "That's surprised. He looks like he's about to break down." "What's the big deal?" "He'll still see you both all the time. They've never spent more than a day apart since they met." Riley's trying to act calm, but he's obviously stressed. He's always depended on others, especially Nate. It's natural to be nervous about such a big change. Maybe it'll be good for him. It will, but Nate's struggling too. He hides it, but I can tell. That's because he spoils Riley too much. He needs to give him space to grow. I chuckled. "They're cute though. I love how much Nate cares for him." Johnny snorted softly. "How come you're not overprotective of me?" I asked, curious. "You get into too much trouble. It would be too much work." I laughed. "Fair point. Do you think Nate realizes how hard it's hitting Riley?" "He's too wrapped up in his own feelings right now. But it'll come out eventually." "Yeah." Riley's been on the verge of tears all day. I feel bad for him. He's the one who chose to go to college. People leave home every year. He'll adjust. We fell into a thoughtful silence until I finally asked the question that had been bothering me. "Johnny, do you think I'm clingy?" "Of course," he answered simply. "You do." I blinked, surprised. "Is it because I visit your office every day? Or because I call and text too much? Or sleep over too often? Because I can change." "If I had a problem with it, I would have told you," Johnny said firmly. "I like you this way. It makes me worry less." And just like that, the knot in my chest unraveled. I grinned. "Worry less about what?" He glanced at me but didn't answer. From the look in his eyes, I knew he wasn't going to, no matter how many times I asked. So, I let the question go, letting my happy, sappy thoughts fill my mind. "That's the most romantic thing you've said to me all week." I reached over, ran my fingers along his arm, gave it a quick squeeze, then pulled away before he could complain about me distracting him. I was suddenly in such a good mood. Take that to... When we stopped at a traffic light, I turned to him again. "Do you know Nate's still upset with me?" "Well, you did drag Riley to a club he wasn't ready for, and things almost went badly." What did you expect? He's acting like I planned the whole thing, I sighed. He thinks I'm a bad influence. Honestly, Nate acts more like Riley's dad sometimes. It's ridiculous. You said before you thought it was cute. I rolled my eyes. You're his best friend. Tell me what I should do to make him like me again. Stay away from Riley. Never. He chuckled. Then be patient. Nate will come around eventually, as long as you stop causing trouble. It's been weeks. Exactly. I rolled my eyes again. Asking Johnny for advice was always a mistake. He was never really on my side. I bet you $200 I can get Nate to talk to me again by the end of next week. Johnny, who loved a good bet, grinned. You'll be waiting at least a month, he said with confidence. So, we're on then? Make it 300 and you do my laundry for a month. And don't come whining to me when you lose. Fine, I said quickly. But when I win, I want 300 and you have to go on a cruise with me once I book it. And no walking around all moody when you lose. I rubbed my hands together gleefully. A long vacation at sea with Johnny. There was no way I'd lose this one. He gave me a long look, as if weighing his options, then finally nodded. Deal. The next morning, I arrived right on time, stepping off the elevator and into the waiting area outside my dad's office. The first thing I noticed was the new legal assistant sitting at her desk beside his door. I glanced at the clock, then walked right past her. The moment I put my hand on the doorknob, she nearly jumped out of her chair. Sir, you can't go in there. He's in a meeting, she whispered urgently. For a second, we just stared at each other. Her wide-eyed panic was so comical that I couldn't help but grin as I pushed the door open and stepped inside anyway. Now, I know what you're thinking. That's so rude, Kyle. You should have waited your turn. But it was already 8:01 a.m. That meant it was my turn. And if I hadn't gone in, his meeting would have lasted forever. Don't mind me, I said to the 24 men seated around the large conference table. I plopped down onto the therapist-style chair beside my dad's desk, lying back and listening. All I heard were problems piled on more problems, but no real solutions. I sighed. This was cutting into my therapy session, and I was not amused. I finally stood and walked to the end of the long table, folding my arms. Why don't you just set up the company in St. Lucia? I suggested. You'd get your 1% tax rate, and you wouldn't have to name them as directors. Just contact one of the trust service companies over there and use them as nominee directors, or even shareholders. Once you figure out the shareholder situation, have them transfer the shares to your group and issue new certificates. Easy. The room went silent. All the young lawyers stared at me like I had grown another head. I sighed. Seriously, Dad, they're cutting into our time. Kyle, my dad said firmly, though I could see the proud glint in his eyes. He turned back to the group. Gentlemen, consider what Kyle just said. Do your research and we'll reconvene on Monday. For now, I'm late for a meeting with my son. Like robots, they packed up their notes and filed out of the room. When they were gone, I frowned. Where do you even find these guys? This is basic stuff. Everyone starts somewhere. They're new hires, fresh out of law school. They'll learn. And you wanted me to waste years going to law school when it's obvious they don't teach them anything? I learned all of this just from reading your books as a kid. He patted my head. Not everyone has your memory, Kyle. Some of us actually have to study. I sat down, knowing exactly what was coming next. You could do amazing things with that mind of yours. You'd make a great attorney. Your best friend is going off to college. Why not go with him? Maybe you'll find something that sparks your interest. It doesn't have to be law. Nope. Kyle, you're cutting into my therapy session, Dad. It's already 8:15 and I promised Riley I'd meet him soon. We're trying to get the inside scoop on Simon and Eddie's not a relationship but soon-to-be situation. He sighed, pulling off his glasses the way he always did when he was frustrated. All right, he said, settling back in his chair. What's going on with you? Aren't you going to do the thing? I asked. He blinked at me, then pulled out a legal pad and pen, pushing his glasses back up. And how does that make you feel, Kyle? He said, tapping the pen just like in the movies. I turned my gaze to the ceiling and sighed dramatically. I feel sad, I admitted. My best friend's going off to college. I'll only see him once a week now, and I think I might be, well, a little down about it. Do you think I'm depressed? If you went to college with him, you wouldn't feel this way. Ah, so you do think I'm depressed, I said, narrowing my eyes. It's that feeling in your chest when you're trying really hard not to cry, but it's right there under the surface. You're in public, so you hold it in so you don't embarrass yourself. That's how I feel every day now. At first, I was overjoyed for him. But ever since he started packing, I've been feeling this way. Have you told him how you feel? No. Nate's stressed about it too, though he won't admit it. And Riley's on the verge of breaking down. I don't want to add to their stress. Do you think Riley's making the right choice? Absolutely. This is his dream, and it's going to be amazing for him. If he doesn't go, he'll regret it. And if you don't go, will you regret it? I shook my head. No. It's never been what I wanted. I'd regret it more if I did go. That's not the point, Doctor. I'm not. The point is, I'm going to miss him. He's my other half, and I feel like I'm losing all the milestones in his life. And statistically, most college students drift apart from their old friends once they make new ones. If Riley outgrows me, I'll be upset. I thought Johnny was your other half. I frowned. Johnny's more like my left lung. It's different. Anyway, that's not the point. He leaned forward. Then what do you want, Kyle? I want things to stay the same. I don't want to lose my best friend. You have plenty of friends. I gave him a look. You sound just like Johnny. Isn't that a good thing? I sighed. Of course, asking a lawyer to play therapist was a mistake. They never just listened, they always wanted to argue. I stood, picking up my phone from his desk. I'll have to cut this session short, Dad. You're stressing me out, and that's not good for my health. I'm stressing you out? He asked. Yes, I said simply. I leaned down, kissed his forehead, and added, I'm staying at Johnny's again tonight, so don't wait up. Where are you headed now? I can give you a ride, Dad offered. Nah, I'll just call a cab. Go meet with your staff so they can head home early. It's Saturday, Dad. You shouldn't work so much. He chuckled. The work of an attorney never really ends. Be safe. I'll see you tomorrow. I ordered my cab as I left the office. Dad's legal assistant didn't even glance at me as I passed her desk. Honestly, it was fine. I'd already made more friends than I could keep track of this past year, and Johnny always teased me about being too friendly. I sat by the large lounge windows outside Dad's office while I waited. Maybe I'd stop by Johnny's later and have Simon pick me up from there when they were ready. Folding my arms, I leaned back and closed my eyes. At some point, I must have dozed off, because the next thing I knew, the assistant was gently calling me. Front desk just called to say your cab is outside, she said. I yawned, glanced at my phone, and jumped up in a panic. Thanks, Daisy. I blurted before racing down the stairs instead of waiting for the elevator. If the driver gave me a bad rating, I'd be so annoyed. This was Johnny's fault for keeping me up all night talking. It wasn't until I was safely seated in the cab, buckled up, that it hit me. I didn't even know the assistant's name. I just made one up on the spot. I sighed and muttered to myself, What's going on with you, Kyle? Huh? The driver asked, glancing at me in the rearview mirror. Don't mind me, I said quickly. Just talking to myself. The first thing I noticed when I arrived at Nate and John's securities firm was the very tall guy at the front desk, wearing square-framed glasses. That desk had been empty for weeks. Hey, Kyle, Gabriel greeted as he walked past. I grabbed his arm. Who's that? I whispered, nodding toward the new guy. Oh, that's Lorenzo. He's the new secretary, Gabriel said before slipping away. I stared, still processing. Lorenzo noticed me and smiled warmly, waving me over. How may I help you, sir? He asked brightly. I folded my arms, trying to look a little important. I'm Kyle. My partner works here. May I have your ID, please? He asked politely. When I handed it over, his smile grew. Yes. You're on the list. You can go right ahead. I'll let him know you're here. I blinked. Wait, what list? The partners gave me a list of people who are allowed in without an appointment, he explained. That was news to me. Can I see it? I'm sorry, sir. I'm not authorized to share it. But you wouldn't be sharing it, you'd just be showing it to me, I reasoned. He only shook his head with that same cheerful grin. I sighed, leaning on the desk. Well, Johnny's my boyfriend, and someday soon he'll be my husband. If you look at it that way, I'm practically your boss too. So technically, I am authorizing you. Before Lorenzo could respond, a familiar voice cut in. Show him the list, Lorenzo. He won't stop pestering you otherwise. I turned and grinned as Johnny walked in carrying a file. Lorenzo retrieved a sheet of paper from a hidden drawer and handed it to me. Always smiling. I skimmed it quickly. Nate's list had Riley, Simon, and Eddie. Johnny's had me, my dad, and Michael. My name was listed first. I couldn't help but grin. Something I don't get, I said. I'm sure you'll tell me, Johnny muttered, sorting files. Why would Nate put Simon on his list when they don't even talk? Because Simon's his brother, Johnny replied simply. I sighed but then turned my focus back to the new secretary. Lorenzo, Enzo, as I decided to nickname him. The injustice of him stealing the secretary spot I'd secretly wanted was almost too much. So, Enzo, I said casually. Can I call you Enzo? Before he could answer, Johnny groaned and took me by the arm. Stop bothering my secretary, he scolded, guiding me down the hall like a mischievous kid. I was just being friendly, I protested with a grin, but he didn't let go until we were locked inside his office. I dropped into a chair and propped my feet on his desk. So, how'd the meeting with Dad go? He called you, didn't he? Johnny sat across from me, giving me a steady look. He wanted me to know you might be depressed. I frowned. Am I? Are you? He asked softly. I shrugged. I don't know. Maybe a little. Not because of Riley, just because life keeps changing. And sometimes, it feels hard to keep up. He leaned forward, concern flickering in his eyes. Where's the Kyle who always felt ready to take on the world? I miss him. I met his gaze. That Kyle is scared of losing his best friend. He doesn't have the strength to take on the world right now. Johnny gestured for me to come closer, but I shook my head. If I went over there, I might break down. Instead, I smirked to cover up the heaviness. What? He asked, narrowing his eyes. I grinned wider. Want to test out the copier? Johnny groaned. Kyle. Riley's POV. Simon was making things way more complicated than they needed to be. All I wanted was a laptop to get me through university, not a spaceship. But he'd been debating with the sales guy for half an hour. Kyle and I sat watching from the side. Eddie, on my other side, seemed oddly entertained, smiling the entire time. I nudged him. Can you make him stop? I whispered. Eddie grinned wider. Do you know Simon? Once he gets started on tech, there's no stopping him. Then why did you even agree to come? I asked. He shrugged. Nothing better to do. Beside me, Kyle yawned, scrolling on his phone before suddenly standing up with determination. He gave me a look, then nodded toward the far end of the store. With a sigh, I followed him. Unsurprisingly, neither Simon nor Eddie noticed us slipping away. Maybe I should just go home and finish packing, I muttered. Kyle waved me off dramatically. Forget about the laptop, Riley. We have much more important things to focus on. Why are you talking like that strange character from that vampire book you're always reading? I asked in frustration. Kyle looked at me like I had just insulted his entire family. For your information, A Vampire's Marine is not a stupid book, it's a masterpiece. And Rain isn't weird, he's incredible. He's basically my spirit animal, Kyle declared proudly. When he realized I wasn't going to play along, he rolled his eyes and physically turned me so I was facing a row of DVDs. See that guy over there? He asked. I nodded. I've been watching him for the last 15 minutes. He keeps stealing glances at Eddie. And? I prompted. And my sad little friend, we're going to use him to make Simon jealous. The guy Kyle was pointing at was tall, broad-shouldered, with a neatly groomed beard. He looked more like a professional athlete than someone who would be caught up in Kyle's schemes. I think you're just stereotyping, I muttered. Just because he looked at Eddie doesn't mean anything. Kyle smirked. If he's not interested, I'll eat my hat. Before I could stop him, Kyle strutted across the store like he was on a runway, hips swaying with exaggerated flair. My stomach twisted as I watched him approach the man. I couldn't hear their conversation, but I saw Kyle pull out a $50 bill and gesture toward Eddie, who was still oblivious nearby. The man shook his head at first, clearly amused, but Kyle just tucked the money back into his pocket and kept talking. Only Kyle could put himself in such an awkward situation and look confident doing it. Being around him often felt like living in a romantic comedy where I was never quite sure if he was the lead character or the eccentric sidekick. I sighed, thinking of the mountain of packing I still had to finish before moving to college. A simple 15-minute trip to the store had turned into chaos, as usual. Just then my phone buzzed. Nate, I'll be there in 10. Me, we're not done. Simon's still arguing with the store guy, Eddie's useless, and Kyle is up to something ridiculous again. That was the end of the text exchange. Nate wasn't much of a texter. I began silently counting down. 5, 4, 3, 2. And right on cue, my phone rang. Hey babe, I answered. What's going on? Simon's been debating with the tech guy for over half an hour. I still haven't finished packing, and Kyle is trying to convince some random guy to flirt with Eddie to make Simon jealous. The guy doesn't even look interested, Nate. He looks like he could be a kickboxer. Classic Kyle, Nate muttered, and I could already picture his annoyed expression. Just don't get involved. Are you still coming down here? You'd probably speed things up. Yeah, I'm on my way. Let Simon do his thing though, he'll make sure you get the best. The best is about to cost me $3,000 I don't have. I just want a decent laptop, not a spaceship. He chuckled. Bring food when you come? Anything with a strawberry milkshake. Oh, and an iced coffee for Kyle. Got it. See you in 20. I pocketed my phone and glanced back at Kyle, who was now chatting with the man like they were old friends. After hesitating, I walked over. I go up there all the time. Can't believe I've never seen you before. I'd remember someone like you, the man said with a smile. Kyle snapped his fingers twice. No, I'm not the one you should be flirting with, Carl. I'm taken, remember? But my friend Eddie over there isn't. You've been looking at him since you walked in, don't pretend you haven't. So, if you won't take my money, at least go say hello for free. Carl laughed, sneaking another glance at Eddie. Honestly, Kyle could charm anyone. A guy who looks like that should have no trouble meeting people. Why are you so determined to play matchmaker for him? Carl asked. Kyle's grin widened. He glanced proudly at Eddie. Because he's amazing. He's been avoiding dating for a while, but I think it's time he gave it another try. And you're totally his type. Carl's eyes flicked back toward Eddie. I couldn't help noticing how big he was, almost as big as John. When his gaze shifted my way, I instinctively stepped back. Not him either, Kyle warned quickly, motioning to me. He's taken, and trust me, his boyfriend would not appreciate it. Don't even think about it. Then, under his breath, he added so only I could hear, some people are just way too curious. Kyle, let's just drop this, I whispered nervously. He sighed. Fine. I'll set Eddie up with Frankie instead. I rolled my eyes. There was no Frankie. But as if on cue, Carl walked past us and headed straight for Eddie. One of these days you're going to get yourself into serious trouble, I muttered. But today is not that day, Kyle replied with a mischievous grin. What happened next was surreal. The second Carl introduced himself to Eddie, Simon, who had been locked in debate with the sales clerk, suddenly stopped mid-sentence. His sharp eyes shifted immediately to his best friend. From where we stood, we couldn't hear what Eddie and Carl were saying, but the tension was clear. Eddie's eyes swept over Carl, definitely intrigued. Simon saw it too. But Simon's expression was hard to read. No jealousy, no anger. Just an intense, almost unsettling focus. His gaze lingered not on Eddie or Carl, but on Eddie's phone when Carl typed something into it before handing it back. Only then did Simon blink, like snapping out of a trance, and turn back to the bewildered store clerk to resume their debate. Eddie, meanwhile, looked pleased as his conversation with Carl wrapped up. Carl soon walked away, leaving Eddie smiling faintly at his phone. Kyle tugged on my arm excitedly. See that? Simon's definitely interested in Eddie. That makes 2 discoveries today, I said. Kyle raised an eyebrow. 2. Eddie's gay, I answered simply. Kyle rolled his eyes. That was obvious. The real mystery is why he and Simon aren't already together. And that, I reminded him, is none of our business. True, he admitted, though the gleam in his eye told me he was already plotting. Just shook my head. When I left for school, Kyle would be free to meddle without me holding him back. You do realize you just set Eddie up with that Carl guy, right? I asked. Kyle only smirked. Kyle rolled his eyes. Give me a break. Simon and Eddie are legendary. Some random guy like Carl couldn't possibly get between them. You're delusional. No, I'm right, he replied with confidence, finally letting go of my arm before strutting away dramatically. I sighed. As frustrating as he could be, I knew I'd miss him. He always made life feel like a comedy I didn't ask to star in. It took another 23 minutes before we finally left the store with a brand new $2,000 laptop. To my surprise, Simon purchased it as a gift. If I was being completely honest, I knew why. Simon and I were both serious gamers, and the last time we'd played against each other, my old laptop gave out right before the match ended. He'd never admit it, but I was pretty sure he thought he was about to win. Today's expensive purchase wasn't just for me, it was for him too. Still, I couldn't deny the excitement bubbling inside me. I was practically grinning from ear to ear as I climbed into Nate's truck. Kyle, on the other hand, was smiling for a completely different reason. He hopped into the back seat, accepted the iced coffee Nate had brought him, and sank into his own world. The ride to Kyle's house was mostly silent. He was lost in his own daydreams. Nate was naturally quiet and honestly still annoyed with Kyle. 15 minutes later, we dropped Kyle off. I turned to Nate. You know, if you're going to be upset with Kyle, you should be upset with me too. He's not my guardian. I made my own choices. Nate's jaw tightened. He took you there when I told him not to. I walked there myself. He didn't drag me. I decided to go because I didn't think it would be a big deal, I countered. It was just a club. People go all the time without any problems. How could we have known things would turn out like that? If you had stayed away like I asked, none of that would have happened. You agreed with me, until Kyle convinced you otherwise. I never agreed, Nate, I said quietly. You didn't want me there because you didn't want me around other people. But I should be able to go out with my friends sometimes without it becoming an issue. He fell silent, his grip on the steering wheel tightening. From the side, I could see the storm brewing in his eyes. You don't trust me, I whispered. That's what this is really about. You thought I'd do something wrong. And now you're worried about me leaving for college for the same reason, aren't you? Don't be ridiculous, Riley, he muttered. But the tears came anyway. I turned to the window, wiping at my cheeks. I hated feeling like I was being punished for something I hadn't done. Tomorrow I'd be leaving for college, something I had worked so hard for, and instead of feeling happy, I felt weighed down by fear, sadness, and doubt. When we got home, I couldn't hold it in anymore. I broke down, crying into what was left of my strawberry milkshake. Nate said nothing as I sobbed, overwhelmed by everything. His lack of trust, my fear of leaving, the thought of being alone in a new place. When he pulled into the driveway, I stayed in the car, crying quietly. He opened my door, guided me inside, and made sure I was settled on the couch before disappearing. A moment later, I heard the slam of our bedroom door. I curled up in a blanket and let the tears run out of me until I was completely exhausted. I don't know how long it was before Nate returned, but when I opened my eyes, he was kneeling on the floor in front of me with a steaming mug in his hand. Here, he said softly. Drink this. I just stared at it, too drained to reach for it. He set it down gently on the coffee table and turned back to me. For a while, we sat in silence. His expression was unreadable. Then finally he whispered, I'm sorry. I'm not going. I'm staying here with you, I blurted out. He looked up, our eyes meeting. You've wanted this for so long. You'll regret it if you stay. If I go, I won't get to see you. I won't know anyone there. It'll just be me in a new place with strangers. You'll see me every weekend, he reassured me with a small smile. And you'll make new friends. It'll get easier. I shook my head. This year has been so perfect. I don't want that to change. He gave a quiet laugh. Kyle's not going anywhere, trust me. And as for me, well, you're the one who's about to go off and grow. I should be the worried one. Because you don't trust me, I whispered again. He sighed. It's not about trust, Riley. You don't see yourself clearly. People notice you wherever you go, even if you don't realize it. Maybe I'm selfish, but I don't like it when others try to take your attention. It's not fair to you, but that's how I feel. The warmth in his voice melted the heaviness in my chest. So, all the times you got quiet around other guys? Because I want you to myself, he admitted softly. I'm going to miss you so much. I'll miss seeing you every morning. I'll miss you burning the rice, even your endless skincare routine. I'll miss walking through the door and seeing you smile. Tears blurred my vision again. I'm not going. He shook his head gently. I don't want you to go, but I need you to. This is your dream. I'll support you all the way. I'll be there every weekend, and we'll talk every day. A few hours drive is nothing. I sniffled and managed a smile. And we'll video chat every day? Every day, he promised. And I'll bring you food on the weekends so you don't starve. That made me laugh through the tears. All I need you to do, he continued, is enjoy the experience. Make friends. Take care of yourself. And call me whenever you need to, no matter what time it is. I'm going to cry the moment you leave me there, I warned. I know, he said gently. Then he cupped my face in his hands, leaned in, and pressed a tender kiss to my lips. When he pulled back, his voice was barely above a whisper. I love you. Thanks for listening to today's BL story. If it made your heart skip a beat, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Only here on BL Stories, where love knows no limits.